"You can stay here, Dad, but I need you to pull your weight around the house." That was how my son put it. Pull your weight. I was 61 years old, a retired electrician with 40 years of job sites behind me, and my son was telling me I needed to earn my keep. I didn't say anything right then. I was still holding a cardboard box, the last one from the truck, and I set it down on the floor of the bedroom he'd given me. It was the spare room at the back of the house, next to the laundry room. The washer and dryer were just on the other side of the wall. I could hear them even then, tumbling somebody's load. My wife had passed 7 months before. Congestive heart failure. She went on a Tuesday morning in October, which somehow seemed wrong. October always felt like her month, all the sweaters she loved, and the drives she wanted to take through the hill country. She was gone before I could call anyone. I sat with her for a long time before I picked up the phone. After that, the house didn't feel like the house anymore. I'd bought it in 1989, 34 years. I knew every creak in the floorboards, every window that stuck in summer. But after she was gone, it was just walls and square footage. My son, he lives out in the suburbs north of Columbus, called me about 2 months later and said it didn't make sense for me to be rattling around in that place alone. He said he and his wife had talked it over. They had the room. It would be good for everybody. I believed him. I sold the house in February. I cleared enough to keep me comfortable for a long while if I was careful. I didn't tell my son the exact number. Something made me keep that to myself. Not distrust exactly, just habit. A man keeps certain things in his own pocket. I drove up to Columbus with 2 carloads of what I kept and left the rest to the estate sale people. My daughter-in-law, I'll call her my daughter-in-law because that's what she is, whatever else I might say. She met me at the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She said the house was mine too now. She said that like she was reading from a card. Her name is Renata. No, wait, I need a different name. Her name is Faye. My son's name is Cody. He's 34. He works in logistics for a distribution company. He's good at it, I'll give him that. He thinks in systems, always has. When he was 12, he reorganized the garage by category and labeled every shelf with a label maker. I thought it was impressive at the time. I think about it differently now. Faye works from home doing something with social media marketing. She has a dedicated office on the 2nd floor. There is a sign on the door that says focus mode in vinyl letters. I learned early on that the sign meant do not knock. They have no children. They have a dog named Biscuit, a golden retriever, with the kind of expressive eyes that make you feel like somebody in that house actually sees you. The first 2 weeks were fine. I fixed the leaking P-trap under the kitchen sink. I recaulked the bathtub on the main floor. I'm an electrician by trade, but I'm handy all around. 40 years of work teaches you that everything connects to everything else. Cody said he'd been meaning to get to those things for months. He seemed genuinely grateful. I should have recognized the shape of what was starting. But I was still soft from grief. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to feel like I was somewhere instead of nowhere. Faye started small. Would I mind starting the dishwasher before I went to bed? Of course not. Would I be able to let Biscuit out in the mornings, since they both slept in a little? Sure. Could I grab a few things at the grocery when I was out? No problem at all. A month in, I was cooking dinner 4 nights a week. I'm a decent cook. Not a chef. I do the things my wife taught me and a handful of things I learned myself over the years. I make a good pot roast. I can do ribs if you give me the afternoon. Faye found this out one Sunday when I made a big Sunday meal, just to have something to do with my hands. And she looked at Cody across the table and I saw something pass between them. I didn't know what it was yet. Within a week, Faye mentioned that her cousin was coming to visit. Would I be able to do a nice dinner? Something impressive? I made herb-roasted chicken with roasted potatoes and a green salad. The cousin ate 2 helpings and told Faye she needed to hold on to this place. Faye laughed and said she agreed. She did not introduce me as her father-in-law. She introduced me as the man who made all of this. I sat with that for a while after they went into the living room. By month 3, Cody had started leaving his laundry outside the laundry room in a basket with a look on it that I can only describe as expectant, not requesting, expecting. The basket would be there in the morning and gone by afternoon, because I'd run it through the wash and folded it and left it outside their door. I had done this without being asked. I had just absorbed it, the way you absorb 100 small things when you're trying to make yourself fit somewhere. My son never said thank you for the laundry. I'm not sure he noticed I was doing it. What I noticed, somewhere around the 10-week mark, was that I was tired in a way I hadn't been since the hard years of work. not body tired. The other kind. The kind that gets into your chest. I started to understand what was happening. I had not moved in with my son. I had moved in with two people who had found a solution to a problem, who was going to handle the domestic work. And I was the solution. The arrangement had a shape, and the shape was that I cooked and cleaned and maintained the house, and walked the dog and bought the groceries, and in exchange I had a room next to the dryer. I want to be fair. Neither of them ever raised a voice at me. Faye was always pleasant enough when she wanted something. Cody would occasionally clap me on the shoulder and say something like, "This place runs better since you got here, Dad." He meant it as a compliment. I understand that now. He genuinely did not see what he was describing. That's the part that took me longest to name. It wasn't cruelty, it was invisibility. I had made myself so easy to use that they had stopped seeing me as a person who might have his own hours, his own tiredness, his own need to just sit somewhere and read a book, without being asked if I could start something in the crock pot first. The moment I remember most clearly came on a Thursday evening in April. I had spent that day, my whole day, preparing for a dinner party they were throwing for Cody's colleagues from work. 7 people coming. I'd been to the store twice. I made a brisket that had been in the oven since 10 in the morning. I made 2 side dishes from scratch. I baked a dessert, a peach cobbler, because Faye mentioned someone had a birthday. At 5 o'clock, Faye came downstairs in a dress I hadn't seen before and looked around the kitchen like a hotel guest checking into a room. She lifted the lid on the brisket and nodded. Then she said, "Oh, Dad, I think it might be a little awkward to have you at the table tonight. These are all Cody's work people. It might be, it might throw off the vibe." I looked at her. She had her phone in her hand and was already moving toward the living room. "The vibe," I said. "It's just, they don't know you. It's a work thing, you understand." I stood in that kitchen for a moment after she walked away. The brisket I had made was on the stove. The cobbler was cooling on the rack. The table was set with their good dishes, which I had hand-washed that afternoon, because Faye said the dishwasher left spots. I went to my room. I changed my shirt. I picked up my jacket and my keys. I left through the back door so I wouldn't walk through the dining room. I drove to a diner about 4 miles away that I'd eaten at a few times since moving up here. The waitress there, older woman, always working the evening shift, had started to recognize me. She brought me coffee without my asking, and took my order for a club sandwich and a bowl of soup, and she called me Han. And I sat in that booth for 2 hours, just being a person who was sitting somewhere. When I got back to the house, the party was still going. I could hear laughter from the dining room. I went upstairs. I did not go into the kitchen. I did not help with the cleanup. I lay in bed and I thought about my wife. She would have had something to say about all of this. She always had a way of naming things before they had fully formed, of seeing around corners I didn't know were there. I missed her for a lot of reasons that night, but mainly I missed having someone who saw me. That night I made a decision. But I made it quietly, the way you make real decisions, not with an announcement, just with a settling. I knew what I was going to do and I knew when. I gave myself 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, I did not change anything visible. I kept cooking most nights. I kept walking the dog. I did not want anyone to sense a shift, start a conversation that would turn into an argument, that would turn into me explaining myself to people who hadn't asked what I was feeling in 11 months. What I did do quietly was make calls. I had a friend from my working years. He'd retired a few years ahead of me and moved up to a lakeside community about 2 hours north of Columbus. I'd been to visit him and his wife twice since moving to Cody's. I called him on a Saturday when Cody and Faye were at a farmer's market. "What are you actually looking for?" he asked me. "Something small," I said. "Something mine." He gave me 2 names. I made 2 calls. One of them turned out to be a 1-bedroom apartment in a town called Morrow, which I thought was either a very good omen or a very good joke, about 40 minutes south of Columbus. It was on the 2nd floor of an old building downtown, above a hardware store, $850 a month, hardwood floors, a window in the kitchen that looked out over the main street. It came with a parking spot behind the building. I drove down to look at it on a Tuesday, while Cody was at work and Faye was in focus mode. I put in my application that afternoon. I was approved within the week. I set my move-in date for a Friday, 2 weeks out. I arranged for a small moving truck, just enough for my boxes and the few pieces of furniture I'd bought since selling my house. I told no one. That was not about drama. I want to be clear about that. I have never been a dramatic man. I spent 40 years working jobs where drama got someone hurt. You think carefully, you move with purpose, and you let the work speak. I was not trying to teach anyone a lesson. I was not planning a reveal. I was simply handling my life the way I'd always handled it, by figuring out what needed to be done and doing it. The Thursday before my move, I sat down at the kitchen table in the evening after dinner. I'd made spaghetti, which Faye had eaten 2 plates of while looking at her phone, and I wrote a note, not a long one. Cody, I've found an apartment. I'll be moving out tomorrow. I've enjoyed the time here and I'm grateful you made room for me when things were hard. I think this is better for everyone. I left the key on the hook by the garage. Take care of yourself. Love, Dad. I sealed it in an envelope and put it on the kitchen counter under the fruit bowl where they'd be sure to see it. I set my alarm for 6 in the morning. The truck was there at 7. My friend drove up from his place and helped me carry the boxes down. It took less than 3 hours. There wasn't that much. When you pare your life down twice in 1 year, you find out what you actually need. And it isn't much: a bed, a kitchen table, your books, the one photograph you couldn't leave behind. I set that photograph, my wife and me, 1997, somewhere on the Oregon coast. Both of us laughing at something I can't remember now, on the windowsill of my new apartment where it gets the morning light. Then I went to the diner I'd already found in Morrow. Every town has one if you look, and I had breakfast. Eggs over easy, toast, coffee. I sat by the window and watched the street wake up. A man walking a beagle, a teenager unlocking a bicycle, the hardware store owner below me raising the security gate. My phone started ringing at 10:47 that morning. The first call was Cody. I let it go to voicemail. The second call was Cody. I let it go. Then Faye called. Then Cody again. By noon I had 11 missed calls. I turned the ringer off and finished my coffee. I listened to the voicemails that afternoon. Cody's first one was confused. Dad, what's going on? Call me back. The second was harder to listen to. Not because it was angry, but because he sounded genuinely lost. Like a boy who'd come home from school and found something important missing. Faye's was practical. I don't understand. We need to talk about this. Which I thought was very Faye. By the end of the first week, I had 32 missed calls between the two of them. I called Cody back on day 9. He'd left a voicemail that was different from the others. Quieter. He said he'd been thinking, and he didn't want to be the kind of son who didn't notice things. He said he thought maybe he hadn't noticed things. He asked if we could talk. I appreciated that message. I called him back. We talked for almost an hour. I said what I'd needed to say for a long time, and I said it the same way I'd lived through those months. Without raising my voice, without cataloging every grievance, without asking him to feel any particular way. I told him that I'd needed to feel like a person, not a resource. I told him I didn't blame him. I told him the apartment was good and I was glad to be in it. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, I didn't know you were unhappy. I know, I said. Why didn't you say something? That was the question I'd been rolling around since before I left, because I'd asked myself the same thing. Why hadn't I said something earlier? Why had I cooked the dinners and run the laundry and stepped back from the table the night of the party? Why had I made myself that small for that long? I think the truest answer I have is this. Grief makes you willing to accept less than you deserve, because the alternative feels like standing alone in a field with no shelter in sight. I had lost my anchor. I was trying to attach myself to something, and I confused being needed with being loved, and I confused being helpful with belonging, and I confused staying quiet with keeping peace. They are not the same things. I know that now. I told Cody I'd like to have dinner with him sometime. Just the two of us, if that was all right. He said yes. We had dinner 2 Saturdays later at a steakhouse near his office that he'd been wanting to try. It was a good dinner. We talked about my wife, his mother. Really talked about her, for the first time since the funeral. He cried a little, so did I. Faye and I have found a cordial distance that suits us both. I don't think either of us will pretend it's more than that, and I think we're both fine with it. My apartment in Morrow is the right size. That sounds like a small thing. It isn't. The right size means I make the mess, and I clean it up. I decide what's for dinner, which some nights means eggs and toast at 8 o'clock, and no one has an opinion about it. I have a neighbor down the hall, a retired school teacher named Al, who is immediately familiar to me for reasons I can't fully explain, and we have fallen into the habit of playing chess on Wednesday evenings on one of our kitchen tables, alternating weeks. I'm losing more than I'm winning. I don't mind. I've been taking long drives on Sundays. The hill country I was thinking about, the drives my wife always wanted to take. I've been taking them. I pull over when something looks worth looking at. I don't have a schedule. There is a version of my life I almost disappeared into. One small surrender at a time. A room by the dryer, a basket of laundry, a dinner party where the help eats in his room. I almost let that be the whole of it. I'm 61 years old. I have the morning light on my wife's photograph, and a chess game on Wednesdays and a diner where the coffee comes without asking. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is, as it turns out, mine.